Hi, I'm Kazu and I Play Dirty, and welcome to the Runway, where we'll be modeling our Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition character builds, starting with the Wigsinger. So, Dungeons & Dragons content is new to this channel, so I will just give a quick rundown of who I am. So, I started playing Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition about a year ago. For that entire year, I played as a player character. I did not DM, although I am sort of interested in DMing. We'll see if that happens. The entire year, I did only play online, which, yes, does mean I do not own a physical pair of dice, which I can already hear you clicking off the video. I know I'm a Zoomer, everything's digital, I have PDFs, I have Google Docs. You're gonna see I have a lot of Google Docs. And before I started playing Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, I actually had never played any other TTRPGs before. But I had played around tens of thousands of hours of MMORPGs, which I know they are not analogous to D&D, but I would be lying if I said that I didn't come into the game having a love for MMOs and bringing that love into the game. And the more I played D&D, the more I saw that it was a unique experience, completely separate from MMOs, and the way you play it is very different from MMOs, and you shouldn't really be comparing the two. However, the one thing I did retain from all my hours and love for MMOs was my passion for optimizing and min-maxing and choosing the most efficient and effective character options for building a character in D&D and in MMOs, because that's one thing that really gets drilled into you when you're playing an MMO. And I had a lot of fun building characters, going through character options, just looking at all of the different features and choices that you can make in Dungeons & Dragons when making a character. That was honestly one of the most fun parts of Dungeons & Dragons for me. And yes, I understand that making your character effective is not the be-all end-all of Dungeons & Dragons, but it is an aspect of the game, and it is an aspect that I really enjoy. And understanding that ethos that I'm bringing to the game will give you an idea of how I am going to be presenting the build for the Wigsinger today, and most of the builds that I will be presenting in the future on this channel. They will be optimized to be efficient in combat specifically. That's not saying that you have to make a character efficient for combat in Dungeons & Dragons. I mean, if you want to, you can. The options are there. If you don't want to, you don't have to. Dungeons & Dragons is such a flexible game. You can do really whatever you want with it, and however you play the game is completely valid. This video is not telling you how to play your character. It is simply an example of how I personally would play my character if I wanted to achieve what specific goals I have for this character. So I hope you find it helpful when making a character, and if not, at least entertaining to see what I do with my character. So let's get to the actual character. So when I approached this concept of what I wanted to do with this character, I came in wanting to make a controller. Wanted to make someone who can inflict negative status effects on their enemy, who can rearrange the battlefield to best benefit the party, and who can create environmental hazards to hinder the enemy. And looking through all of the options and classes and all of the different stuff you can get from the player's handbook, from Xanathar's and from Tasha's, very clearly you would want to play a wizard if you wanted to be a controller, just because the wizard has access to the largest number of the most effective controlling spells in the game. So it just makes sense for you to play a wizard. So I knew I wanted to play a wizard. And looking at how wizards play in Dungeons & Dragons, generally what happens is at the first round of combat, you cast your big encounter-changing concentration spell, And then for the rounds after that, you just run away and hide. You try your best to maintain concentration of your spell. You shore up your defenses. And if you've done all that, then you can maybe sling some cantrips. You can maybe cast some instantaneous effect spells that will augment your control. But other than that, you're really just maintaining your concentration on your big spell. And that sort of play style really makes it very efficient for you to have as much distance from the combat occurring as possible. You don't want to be up in the fray, because the closer you are to your enemies, the more likely you are to be hit, and the more likely you are to be hit, the more likely that your concentration on your big spell is going to end. And once your concentration ends, then you're really useless. Your only role on the battlefield for most wizards is that you are maintaining a big spell that is affecting the battlefield, and if it ends, then that was your one job. You had one job and you didn't do it. So you really do want to stay as far away from the battlefield as possible so that you don't get hit and you don't lose concentration. So I knew I wanted to play a wizard. I wanted to play someone who maintained distance from the combat. And looking at all of the subclass options for wizard, I was actually, surprisingly, really drawn to the Bladesinger, which is maybe controversial considering a lot of people would consider maybe the diviner or the enchanter or the conjurer or a lot of other subclasses better as a controller wizard, but also controversial because clearly the Bladesinger was an archetype intended to be played as a upfront melee combatant focusing on DPR and just getting right into the battle. However, the features provided by the Bladesinger subclass honestly really, yes, they do support the playstyle of going up and being a melee fighter, but they also really do support the playstyle of staying back as a controller and just adjusting the battlefield from a distance, which is not as straightforward as you'd think. A lot of the benefits that the Bladesinger brings to a controller character are not really written on the abilities in the Bladesinger. A lot of them are very subversive, and I will get into more detail about how specifically the abilities subversively improve the playstyle of an at-range controller as we go through the build that we're going to be looking at. So another thing that you should probably know that would probably make you understand why I chose to play a Bladesinger over, a diviner or an enchanter as a controller character is this general ethos I have for when I make characters. And that is, I really put a heavy weight on the importance of low-level features over high-level features. And there's many reasons why this is true. First of all, a lot of the campaigns I play start at very low levels and they don't go into high tier play. At most they go to maybe level 7 or level 8. So if I'm playing a character that is really focused around a very powerful feature that I get at high level, I might not even get to that level when I'm playing in the campaign. So that's kind of pointless to build a character around that. Not only that, but even if you get to high levels with that character, playing at those low levels is just going to be boring. It is honestly just a bore fest, a snooze fest, to play a character that you chose because of a high level feature, and to just play them without that high level feature at low levels is just, for you, it's going to be boring. And I've done that before. I've played characters wanting to get to the high level features, and all I ever thought of when I was playing at low levels is like, when do I level up? When do I get there? When do I get that feature? And I didn't really enjoy the experience of playing the character at the levels I was, and I don't want to play a character that I'm not enjoying. So it really doesn't, for me, I'm not the kind of person that wants to wait to get good. I want to be as strong as possible, as early as possible in the game. And finally, the last reason that I like to do this is that even if you do get to those high level features, you still have those low level features that you got at the beginning of the game. And the low level features are the ones that you're going to be using for the majority of your character's life. If you get a character at level 2, you'll be using that feature from level 2 to level 20. That's 18 levels. If you are looking forward to a feature at level 14, that feature will be used from level 14 to level 20. So, which feature is more important? It doesn't matter how strong, how game-breaking the feature at level 14 is, because it's only going to be used from level 14 to 20, whereas the one at level 2 is going to be used for the majority of your campaign of your character's life. So that's why I put a big weighting on low-level features. And looking at the low-level features of the wizard subclasses, a lot of them are just flavor. And the only ones that really have an impact, like I've said, are the diviner and the enchanter. And the portent feature is strong. Obviously, I'm sure everyone knows that. But honestly, I don't think it is reliable enough to augment the style of control that I'm looking for. And I could go and make an entire video about the problems of portent and playing a diviner and how it's kind of a trap if you're wanting to play a controller wizard. And the enchanter, the low level ability forces you to be in melee, and if you're in melee, you've already fucked up. So the diviner and enchanter honestly they're strong, but they have some pretty big drawbacks. But when we look at the Bladesinger and their second level ability, Blade Song, it is honestly such a strong and powerful ability, especially compared to the other second subclass abilities the other wizard subclasses get. And it will be effective at level 2 when you learn it, and it will be effective at level 20 because it scales so well. Giving a bonus to your AC and your concentration checks is such a powerful and universally strong ability that will be useful at all tiers of play. And that's before we even consider that it scales with tiers of play. The higher your proficiency bonus, the more often you'll be using it. And also, it scales with your intelligence. So the higher your intelligence, the more effective it will be. And of course, we're going to be wanting to improve our intelligence because that improves everything we do as a wizard. So it has great synergy with wanting to just double down into intelligence and be as wizardly as we could possibly be. So as a second level ability, it's hard to pass up. And that's why we are going to be playing a Bladesinger wizard to fulfill our character role as a at-range controller. And quite specifically, we are going to be playing a Wigsinger, not a Bladesinger, because we have removed the blade in Bladesinger because we're not going to be fighting in melee. I'm sorry, we're not going to be using a blade. I know that's literally the purpose of the class, but if you want to play a Bladesinger as a melee character, go ahead. That is perfectly effective. I personally don't like that playstyle. And for this particular build, we're going to be focusing on being like I said, an at-range controller, and we're going to see how the Bladesinger archetype enhances that playstyle. So, speaking of Wigsingers, let's talk about the sort of flavor of the character, how you would roleplay it. Personally, I imagine this character as, a drag queen who switches their wigs every day, never wear the same wig twice in a row. That is just a general rule in life that you should always remember. For Mondays, we might wear a pink wig. Tuesdays, gotta get the aquamarine. Thursday is obviously bald. And Fridays is when we let loose. And Fridays is when we whip out the rainbow wig and we hit the clubs. Honestly, a Bladesinger wizard is basically just a nerdy bard. And a drag queen character would be great as a bard as well, but I don't really like bards. So we're just going to play that character as a wizard. Honestly, any character concept you have for a bard could probably be applied to a Bladesinger wizard. Like on your downtime activity, you can be, trying on boas, different accessories. You could be adjusting your armor, sewing on little ruffles, putting little flourishes and little pins and bedazzling and just, beautifying, freshening yourself up. But of course, the blade singer archetype is a very evocative one where it's supposed to be using a blade to augment its wizardly spellcasting. And since we're not going to be using a blade, I still do like that evocative imagery. So what I was thinking is you could just have maybe tattoos of blades on your arms and on your hands, and then when you're like dancing and doing your blade song, it's gonna look like you're using a blade because like the tattoos are like moving around, but you're not actually gonna have to wield a blade. So I kind of get around that sort of dissonance between the flavor of the archetype and how we're gonna play it by just putting tattoos on my character. Also, honestly, a blade singer who doesn't use a blade is a very interesting role play opportunity to figure out why your blade singer doesn't use a blade. You could be maybe raised by blade singers and you're just bad with a blade so that you got kicked out. Or maybe you are sort of an avant-garde artist who is creating a new style of blade singing that doesn't require a blade. And you could be just like a free spirit, sort of an abstract thinker. There's a lot of different options that you have that are baked into the class that would make a very fun and interesting character to play. So why don't we finally get into the actual build that we'll be playing today. So here we go. I've got my Zoomer Google Doc up, so bear with me. So at level 1, we are going to start Wizard, and immediately we already are seeing the benefit of choosing a Blade Singer as our subclass. So if we were not a Blade Singer, as any other wizard, it would be very tempting to actually start the game as a level 1 artificer. Why? Because we don't really have to stretch our ability scores thin. We already have 15 intelligence, and you only need 13 intelligence to multiclass into an artificer. When you're starting artificer, you will get proficiency in constitution saves, which is extremely useful for a wizard. You will get proficiency in medium armor and shields, which is great because a wizard's AC is kind of infamously shit. And not only that, you'll get proficiency in thieves' tools, tinker's tools, and another tools of your choice, which is just fun and useful and flavorful. You also get full access to the entire list of first level spells that the artificer can prepare. They know all of their spells and they can choose what to prepare on a long rest, which is incredible. And most notably, you retain full spell slot progression as a full caster. So starting as artificer just gives you so much that it's really hard for a wizard to not start as artificer. So why don't wizards just all start as artificers? Well, there's one quite notable drawback from starting as artificer, and that's that you push back your spells known progression of your wizard by a level for every tier of play. And that is a very crippling drawback because as a wizard, like I said, your one job was to cast that big concentration spell at the beginning of combat. Now, if you don't even know that concentration spell that you were supposed to cast, how can you do what your character wants to do if you don't have access to the spell? So, especially for a wizard where literally at every level of spell, they get huge, impactful, encounter-changing, game-changing spells that are extremely useful. Pushing those spells known back by an entire level is antithetical to what you're trying to do as a controller wizard. So normally wizards have a pretty big dilemma between, do I start as artificer and get all these crazy defensive options and utility options, or do I just go pure wizard and get access to the best spells as fast as possible? It's a really hard dilemma. There's no real right answer that would solve those issues. Except there is. there is a way to solve those issues, and that is to play a Bladesinger, because a Bladesinger, by their subclass ability, will get a boost to their Constitution saving throws for concentration, and will get a boost to armor class, and will retain full progression for spells known. So really, as a Bladesinger, this is not a dilemma for us. We get amazing defenses, amazing concentration checks, and we don't even have to work for it. We get full progression known on our spells known for Wizard, and we don't trade off anything for that. So already at level 1, you are getting more synergy for being a controller wizard than other wizard subclasses are able to get. So what else are we doing at level 1? Well, let's look at our ability scores. So we're going to assume point buy, and we're going to get 15 intelligence because that is obviously our main spellcasting ability. We are going to get 14 dexterity because we cannot afford to get 16. We're going to get 14 constitution because we cannot afford to get 16. And quite notably, we are going to have an even number for our constitution. Why? Because we're not going to be taking resilient constitution later on in this build. A feat that is almost necessary for every other wizard other than Bladesinger. And why are we not taking resilient constitution? Well, because at level 2, when we Bladesing, we're going to have a +6 to our constitution save for concentration. And at level 4, we're going to have a +7 to our concentration check. So, do we really need resilient constitution? No. It's honestly pointless to take resilient constitution. It's a feat tax that other wizards are going to have to pay, but we don't have to pay that tax. Instead of taking resilient constitution down the line, we can take better and more offensive feats that will better improve our ability to be a wizard controller. So again, we're seeing already, just with our ability score choices, how we're getting more synergy with the wizard class than other subclasses will provide. And the rest of the ability scores are really up to you. It doesn't really matter too much. I put 10 in wisdom because I want a halfway decent wisdom save and perception ability check. I put 10 charisma because we're going to have a proficiency in performance and we're going to be a very charismatic character. So I kind of want to have like a somewhat decent charisma, at least not negative. And then we're going to dump strength because no one cares about strength. This character definitely doesn't care about strength. So clearly, we're going to be, as you can see on the screen, starting as a custom lineage race. Quite notably, custom lineage allows you to be a small or medium size, and I would recommend being a medium size because that would allow you to use very useful spells in the wizard's arsenal, such as Thunderstep and Dimension Door, on medium-sized allies. So there is a very mechanical benefit to being medium. We will also increase our intelligence by 2 to make 17 intelligence, and then we get a feat, which we're going to take a half feat to increase our intelligence further by 1 for a total of 18, which means that we're going to start the game with an 18 intelligence. And that right there is why custom lineage is so powerful, because it allows you at level 1 to take a half feat and start the game with an 18 in your main ability score. But going back to the feat we're getting, which is telekinetic, which will be extremely helpful to push people into the environmental hazards that we're going to create, specifically Web and Evert's Black Tentacles. Not only can it push people in, but it can also push people further back, deeper into the web or the black tentacles when they're already in there, so that's great. It also has great utility as basically a bonus action disengage for either yourself or your allies. It has great utility, great battlefield control, and as a controller, it is a great addition to our arsenal and a lovely addition to custom lineage that Variant Human does not get, is that we get dark vision, which is extremely helpful. There are a million situations where when you're playing a variant human, you wish you had dark vision, but custom lineage is able to give up a proficiency and get dark vision. And I also want to talk about how we are taking a half feat and how this is another way that the Bladesinger is just more efficient for a controller caster. Because A lot of first level wizards will be tempted to take Warcaster, either at level 1 as a variant human or custom lineage, or at level 4. But we don't have to, because we already have literally a +6 to our concentration checks at level 2. So we don't have to pay the feat tax. And we can get our intelligence up faster than any other wizard can without trading a weakness in concentration checks. We're already seeing how Bladesinger is creating great efficiencies in the class. For background, I'll go with Entertainer. It's not too relevant, but I guess it makes sense for this character. And now let's look at the spells that we are preparing at level 1. So just to explain what is going on, I'm going to be color coding the spells that we get. So purple means that a spell we are learning for the first time, we are putting into our spell book. Red means a spell that we had prepared previously, but we are now unpreparing. And green means it is a spell that we knew, but we are changing its method of preparation from one way to another. So usually that would mean that it's in our spell book, but it's unprepared, and we're moving it to one of our prepared spells. It may sound a little complicated, but I'm sure it'll be very easy to follow along when we go through all the levels. So let's look at the cantrips. So quite notably, I'm not going to be picking Toll the Dead as one of our cantrips because, yes, Toll the Dead probably does the most damage out of all of the wizard cantrips. However, even doing the most damage that a wizard cantrip can, it still does mediocre damage compared to other classes. So we don't really want to specialize in damage when we'll never be as good as any of the other classes. So I'm going to take Ray of Frost as our go-to damage spell. Mostly it's going to be used as a control spell, something to augment when we have creatures stuck in our environmental hazards. So if someone's stuck in a web, you can Ray of Frost them, and even if they escape from the web, they have a penalty to movement, and they may not even be able to get out of the web anyways, and then they'll be still stuck in it next turn. So Ray of Frost has great synergy that way. The same reason why Ray of Frost is good, I'm going to choose Gust, because just like Telekinetic Shove, it's going to help position our enemies so that they are in our environmental hazard spells. You might say, why have Gust when you already have Telekinetic Shove? And I would say, well, if something's good, why not have more of it? If an enemy fails a Gust save and a Telekinetic Shove save, we can move them 10 feet, which is great. I can push them into my environmental hazard from a greater distance. And even if they only need to be pushed 5 feet, there's no guarantee that they're going to fail the save on Gust. So it allows me to attempt to push someone 5 feet with the Telekinetic Shove twice, because I get to push them once with the Telekinetic Shove. If they succeed on that, I'll get to push them a second time with Gust. And that just gives me a more reliable way of pushing people into my environmental hazards. And of course, just like Telekinetic Shove, you get a free disengage for your allies, and you can use it in a bunch of other tactical ways, like pushing people off cliffs, pushing people into your allies' area of effect spells, Spirit Guardians, whatever else they have. So it's just a great utility spell, especially for a controller character like we are. And finally, we're going to be taking Mage Hand, which again may seem like an odd choice because we already get Mage Hand from the telekinetic feat. However, the great thing about choosing Mage Hand as one of our wizard cantrips, and on top of that taking telekinetic, means that since we already know Mage Hand, the telekinetic feat will extend the range of Mage Hand another 30 feet, so we'll have a 60-foot Mage Hand, which is amazing. Mage Hand is already such a great spell. Improving it is so useful. Basically, you'll be able to trigger traps with the Mage Hand from 60 feet away, so you won't be in the blast radius of the trap when you spring it. And obviously it has tons of other applications in puzzle solving, exploration, and roleplay, which are really made much better by extending the range to 60 feet, so it's definitely worth taking at level 1. Now, if we look at our prepared spells, There is something I need to say about how a wizard learns their spells. So, there are a couple things that are unique to a wizard. First of all, a wizard, when they learn a spell, knows it from level 1 to level 20. They will know that spell for their entire career, and they cannot remove it from their spell book, which is unlike any other class who can trade out spells known for different spells. That means that when you're picking spells for a wizard, you have to think, well, is this spell useful now? Okay, but will this spell also be useful later on in my career? I don't know. So you have to decide when you're picking spells how useful they are at all tiers of play, because you will have access to the spells that you're choosing at all tiers of play. So that's one very important aspect to consider for a wizard choosing their spells. For example, other casters may take Shatter at 3rd level because it's the best AoE spell to take and it's pretty decent. However, it's very, very costly for a wizard to take Shatter at level 3 because as soon as you reach level 5, Shatter becomes obsolete and you wasted a spell known on Shattered and you can't unlearn it. So we have to consider that when we're picking spells. The second thing that is unique to a wizard is that a wizard does not have to prepare rituals to cast them. So rituals will be very useful for us to take since the wizard is the most efficient ritual caster. And obviously, we're going to be learning more spells than we can prepare. So let's look at the spells that we're preparing at 1st level. We are going to be preparing Sleep because I just said that we have to make sure to pick spells that are good at every level. However, Sleep is such a powerful spell that it is worth preparing at 1st level, even though at like level 3 or level 4, it's gonna not be useful at all. Especially considering if we don't learn Sleep, we're not gonna be that useful at level 1. So in order to be useful at level 1 and considering how powerful and how impactful Sleep is at level 1, we are going to learn it. We're also going to learn Grease, which has great synergy with Telekinetic Shove and Gust and our environmental spells like Web. They'll be able to stack on each other. So Grease is one of the spells that will be useful at level 1 as well as useful at level 20 because it is a non-concentration area of effect debuff that will stack with our other more powerful spells. I'm also going to prepare Fog Cloud. This is probably the most optional of the spells I have chosen to prepare, mostly because I really don't know what else to prepare at this level. You could put in Magic Missile or another ritual if you wanted. I'm going to choose Fog Cloud because it's a poor man's counter spell, in that if you cast it on yourself, a lot of spells that rely on sight will be unable to target you. For example, stuff like Tasha's Hideous Laughter, Hold Person, or Banishment require you to see the target, and clearly those spells are crippling if you fail to save, so you really don't want to be targeted by them. However, Fog Cloud is not so useful because at low levels you're probably not going to be facing spellcasters, but it is useful in the rare case that you do face spellcasters. So it's nice to have a emergency spell for that very niche situation. Obviously, we're going to be preparing Shield, one of the best spells that a wizard can prepare. It'll stack with our Blade Song. It'll help us maintain concentration because it'll stop attacks from hitting us, basically. It's an extremely useful spell, and it's a spell that will be useful at level 1 and useful at level 20, so we're definitely taking that. We're also going to take Absorb Elements, not as universally applicable as Shield, but again, a very strong choice to maintain our survivability at level 1 and at level 20. Admittedly, you're not going to use Absorb Elements too much at level 1 because you probably won't be targeted with energy damage. But again, this is an investment in our mid to higher level tier of play. Then finally, we're going to learn Find Familiar, but we're not going to prepare it. The Familiar will be able to provide the help action every round, which is extremely helpful. It'll also serve as a great scout, and it can have a lot of other utilities, especially if you pick a Flying Familiar. It'll let you explore and solve puzzles much easier. It provides us so much utility, and it's a spell unique to wizards, so we're definitely going to take it. Now, quite notably, we are not preparing or learning mage armor because at level 2 we will get proficiency in light armor and we will be wearing light armor, and this is another benefit that Bladesingers bring to the wizards because any other subclass of wizard is going to have to learn mage armor, whereas we don't have to waste a spell known, a spell prepared, and a spell slot every day on mage armor. Instead, we can prepare better spells and use those spell slots on more offensive spells like Grease. So again, Bladesinger is subversively creating a more tightly built, streamlined wizard, more so than other subclasses will enable. Also, when we're looking at spells for wizard, we are going to be avoiding single target save or suck spells. So like spells akin to Tasha's Hideous Laughter, which we could have taken at first level, where if the creature fails the save, they are taken out of the fight, or if they succeed on the save, nothing happens. It's too unreliable of a strategy to use those kind of spells because there's no way to guarantee they'll work, and sometimes they do work and that's great, but sometimes they don't, and you just wasted a spell slot and an action on doing nothing. It's just more reliable to use different spells, so we won't be taking stuff like Tasha's Hideous Laughter, Hold Person, Banishment. So let's bring this character to level 2. We're going to learn Bladesong, and like I said, Bladesong is extremely strong. At second level when we get it, it is extremely strong as we keep going. And there is a limitation to Bladesong that you can only use it a proficiency bonus number of times per day, which at level 2 will be 2 times per day. But that really isn't too much of a problem for us because at every tier of play, we're only going to have a limited number of our highest level of spell slot. So what's going to happen is that those limited number of times when we're casting our big concentration spell with those highest spell slots on the same round, we're going to bonus action Bladesong. So it's fine that it's limited. We don't really need it constantly. So let's look at what spells we're learning at second level. We're going to be learning more rituals. We're going to learn Detect Magic, which a lot of people say is super useful. I really don't like Detect Magic. I usually don't take it in most of my characters because I find that it's largely useless. The situations where people use it, I feel like it gives you no information. I really struggle to see the use of Detect Magic. However, since we're a wizard and we can use it efficiently, we're going to take Detect Magic. We're also going to take Comprehend Languages, which is a decent utility spell. We don't need to prepare it. However, we have so many preparation slots that we have nothing else to prepare, so we'll prepare it. We're going to eventually unprepare it. I mean, it is useful to not spend 10 minutes in order to understand someone that you're talking to right in front of you, because if you had spent those 10 minutes, they might have initiated combat or been tired of waiting and left, so it has some uses in being prepared. So at third level, we are going to get second level spell slots, which means we can unprepare Comprehend Languages, and we get great control spells. We'll get Web and Maximilian's Earthen Grasp. Web is going to be useful if you're able to hit multiple targets that are bunched up, and Maximilian's Earthen Grasp is going to be useful if there's a chaotic melee and you can't really place the web, so Earthen Grasp is going to be your go-to control spell at that point. And then at level 4, we are going to increase our intelligence by 2, so we'll get a total of 20 intelligence, which other wizards are going to struggle to do because they will have to sacrifice taking Warcaster. Love being a Bladesinger. We will get another cantrip, which is going to be Mindsliver. Quite notably, Mindsliver is not going to have great synergy with Web or Maximilian's Earthen Grasp because they require enemies to make a check to escape. We don't have any spells that it's useful with now, but later on, level 6, we're going to take Slow, and there's going to be a lot of other spells that require saving throws at the end of the creature's turn, and in those situations, Mindsliver will be great to have prepared. We're also going to take Misty Step and Mirror Image. Quite notably, they are investments in higher tiers of play, because right now you only have 3 second level spell slots. You don't want to be just burning them on Mirror Images and Misty Steps, only burn them if you absolutely have to. You kind of want to use the second level spell slots on your big control spells, which is Web and Maximilian's Earth and Grasp. But once we get to higher levels and second level spell slots are not as powerful as they used to be, we can use those second level spell slots on protective spells and emergency spells like Mirror Image and Misty Step. At 5th level, we are going to get access to our 3rd level spells, which is a big bump for us. We're going to finally unprepare Sleep. We could have unprepared it a long time ago, but we really didn't have anything to prepare instead of it. So we just kept it in, although it lost its usefulness around level 3. So probably stop using Sleep at level 3, but keep it prepared if you have maybe a roleplay situation where you want to use it. I don't know. However, now we are fully unpreparing it, and we are going to take Fireball and Counterspell. Again, I'm going against the ethos of picking spells for Wizard because Fireball is incredibly impactful at level 5, but Fireball upscaled does not do enough damage to keep up with the amount of health that the higher CR monsters are going to get. However, Fireball is just so impactful at level 5 and so, I guess, iconic for the Wizard that it is worth giving up a spell known at higher levels, because it's not going to be useful at higher levels, in order to be extremely effective at this particular level, level 5. So we're definitely going to take Fireball. And we're also going to take Counterspell. Now, Counterspell is, by definition, a very niche spell because it relies on you encountering spellcasters, which is not too uncommon at level 5. It is basically the only spell in the game that can do what it does, and very few people get access to it. So as a wizard, you kind of need to take Counterspell, because in the case where an enemy is bearing down at you with a cone of cold, you're gonna be thankful that you took that Counterspell, and you're gonna be probably the only one in your party who could have taken it. So at level 6, we're going to be getting extra attack from our Bladesinger subclass, which is not going to be as effective as it is for us as if we were playing a melee character. However, we can still use extra attack. As far as I understand, if you're wielding a light crossbow, which has a two-handed property, the two-handed property only applies during the moment that you're performing the attack action. So if you're wielding the light crossbow in your one hand, you take the attack action, you use both hands, and then you replace your second extra attack with a cantrip, which could be like Ray of Frost. Because for your second attack, you're not attacking with the crossbow, so you're not using both hands for it. So that should work. If it doesn't work, it's not a big deal. It's only like a bit of extra damage. It's not too relevant. At this level and at level 5, we have refrained from taking very powerful area of effect shutdown spells like Hypnotic Pattern and Fear and the new Summon Shadow Spawn. And why? Because the situations where you would use Hypnotic Pattern and Fear and Summon Shadow Spawn, you could probably use Fireball and accomplish the same thing. And the situations where you can't use Hypnotic Pattern, Fear, Summon Shadow Spawn, and Fireball, where there is a chaotic melee, you can use Slow. So it just makes sense for us to take Slow at this point. Also, quite notably, it's a great investment at higher levels because Slow will always be useful at all levels of play, whereas Fear, Hypnotic Pattern, and Summon Shadow Spawn are going to decrease in how useful they are at higher tiers of play because more and more enemies are going to be immune to the Frightened and Charmed condition the higher CR we go against, and that doesn't provide a limitation for Slow because Slow does not inflict a specific condition, so there's no immunity to Slow, so it's basically applicable to the entire monster manual. And the second spell we're going to be learning at this level is Liamon's Tiny Hut. Not a lot of casters will get access to this spell, and it provides a very unique effect that not a lot of classes or spells can provide, in that it allows for you to perform a safe, long rest guaranteed. So that is a very powerful feature, a very unique feature, almost iconic for a wizard. So we're going to have to take it. At level 7, we will get 4th level spell slots. We are going to unprepare Fog Cloud. Honestly, we could have unprepared Fog Cloud as soon as we hit level 5 and took Counterspell, but we didn't have anything better to prepare, so we're unpreparing it now, and we're going to be learning Polymorph. Polymorph is another one of those spells that is extremely impactful at level 7, but at higher tiers of play, Polymorph will reduce in its usefulness. Quite notably, how you want to use Polymorph is you want to use it as an emergency option. So you keep your 4th level spell slot available all day, and you wait for an incredibly difficult fight where one of your allies are about to go down, and then you drop concentration on whatever you're concentrating on and polymorph your ally into a giant ape with 150 hit points and a great multi-attack, so that your ally doesn't go down, they stay in the fight, and they have a useful thing to do on their turn, which is do some really good damage with the giant ape's multi-attack. Because we want to save our 4th level spell slot for the emergency where we will be needing to cast Polymorph, we don't necessarily want to take the big control spells that are 4th level, because if we take those big control spells and at the beginning of the encounter we cast those big control spells, then we don't have a 4th level spell slot left, and in the emergency where we need to polymorph our ally, we don't have the 4th level spell slot to polymorph. So in order to use polymorph effectively, we need to keep that 4th level spell slot in reserve. So that's the only 4th level spell we're going to learn. Instead, we're going to, for our 2nd spell known, we're going to take Thunderstep. I'm not going to take Fear, Hypnotic Pattern, or Summon Shadow Spawn because it's still at 7th level. It kind of overlaps with Fireball. I'd rather take a spell that provides an effect that I cannot duplicate with any of the spells on my list, and that is Thunderstep. If you burned your 4th level spell slot on Polymorph already during the day, and you're in that situation again where your ally's about to go down, you have Thunderstep. You can use your 3rd level spell slot to Thunderstep that ally 120 feet away, and now they're safe and they can use their action to do a ranged attack or do something from a distance. Also, if the fight looks like it's going to go south really fast and you want to retreat, you can tell all of your higher health allies to just start retreating, and then the ally who's being ganged up on, you can just Thunderstep out of there. And even Thunderstep can be used preemptively. If your bard gets mobbed by 5 melee enemies, but they haven't attacked yet, and he hasn't lost any health yet, I mean, you should probably still Thunderstep. You can go up to the bard, Thunderstep him out of there, so that he basically gets a free disengage, do a bunch of thunder damage to all those melee combatants. So it can be used in emergencies, it can be used preemptively to rearrange the battlefield. It's just a very flexible spell, and none of the other spells on our list can do a similar effect. At 8th level, we are going to get the Alert feat, considering we already have a 20 intelligence. And again, because we're a Bladesinger, we don't have to pay the feat tax of getting Warcaster or Resilient Constitution. We can get an offensive feat like Alert, which will boost our initiative and make us more likely to go first in combat, which is when we are the most effective and when we can have the most impact on the encounter, allowing us to be a better wizard. We're again seeing how taking Bladesinger allows us to be a better wizard. And what we're going to do with our spells is we are going to learn those big 4th level control spells, because now we have 2 4th level spell slots. So if at the beginning of the encounter we cast a big control spell, then we still have a spell slot left to, in an emergency, cast Polymorph. So now is a great time to take those big control spells, them being Black Tentacles and Watery Sphere. Black Tentacles is basically an improved web, and Watery Sphere is basically an improved Earthen Grasp. You use Black Tentacles when you can place it and hit a lot of enemies, and you use Watery Sphere when it's a chaotic melee and you can just pinpoint the Watery Sphere and move it around exactly where you need it to go. And we are going to be unpreparing Earthen Grasp because we have a lot of high level spell slots now, and it's the weakest of our control spells. Then we are going to go to level 9. At level 9, we get 5th level spells. We're going to learn Wall of Force, which is our first spell that will take its effect and not require the enemy to make a saving throw. The use of Wall of Force is that if you have like a really big enemy and a lot of minions, you want to Wall of Force the enemy, take out all the minions, ready your actions, drop the Wall of Force, and then pile on to the boss. And you get so much action economy from denying the boss from taking their actions and then readying your actions to all simultaneously attack the boss. It allows you to take on the encounter on your terms. And of course, Synaptic Static is a great spell. It's not only a replacement for Fireball, but it does so much more. First of all, it requires an intelligence save, which is way better to target than a dexterity of Fireball. It inflicts psychic damage, which is way more reliable than the fire damage of Fireball, and it inflicts a non-concentration, basically a bane effect, where enemies get a penalty to their dice rolls. And we're going to be unpreparing Web because, again, it's our least effective, lowest level, big concentration spell. So at this point, we're going to just have to unprepare it. So at level 10, we'll get Song of Defense, where we can spend a spell slot to reduce damage we take, which we're not going to do. Waste of our spell slots. I would never use Song of Defense. Maybe I'd use Song of Defense if it's like the end of the day and I'm being targeted with some damage and I don't want to take it and I have spell slots to burn, maybe. But in general, it's just a waste of spell slots, so just ignore that ability. We don't even look at it. So we are going to unprepare Polymorph because at level 10, its effectiveness is just not where it needs to be. It's not doing what it used to be. It's gone at this point. Instead, we are going to get Dimension Door, which is similar to Thunderstep. However, Dimension Door doesn't require line of sight to where we're teleporting. So Dimension Door can be useful out of combat to get past an obstacle, although Dimension Door only teleports yourself and one of their allies, so its use out of combat is iffy, but also its use in combat, whereas Thunderstep can be used in emergencies and can be used preemptively. Dimension Door is basically just an emergency get the fuck out, which is still useful. It's very useful to have that powerful emergency get the fuck out card. Like, for example, if you're in a dungeon in a cramped area and things are going south and all of your allies have fled and you've got one ally that's being ganged up on, you can walk up to them, and if you use Thunderstep, you can maybe teleport to the entrance of the room, where next turn your enemies are just going to walk up to you again and gang up on you and your ally, and it's not going to really help. Or you can Dimension Door up through the ceiling, through however many levels of dungeon you're in, and go straight to the surface, and now you've yeeted completely out of the combat. And our other spell that we're going to learn is Blink, which it's a 3rd level spell, and we're learning only now because, much like Mirror Image, is not so useful when your highest level spell slot is 3rd, because you don't want to be wasting that 3rd spell slot on a Blink. You probably want to use it on a Slow or a Fireball or a Counterspell. However, now that we have 5th level spells, we have 4th level spells, we can afford to use that 3rd level spell to layer our defenses. When we're concentrating on our higher level spells like Wall of Force or Black Tentacles, we can afford to burn a slot on Blink. So now at 11th level, we'll get 6th level spell slots, which means we are going to be learning Contingency, which is a spell unique to the wizard. How I would suggest using Contingency, or how I prefer to use Contingency, is to, when you're facing a really powerful encounter, you can, on the first round of combat, Wall of Force, do your little blink, and you trigger the effect of Blink, and then you use your bonus action for Blade Song. So in that big encounter on the first round, you've got your big spell going, you've got your defensive Blade Song, and you've got your defensive Blink going. So I like using Contingency as a preemptive way to layer up our defenses. And I've put contingency on our list of unprepared spells because you want to cast contingency on your downtime days, the days when you're not expecting combat, because the effect lasts for 10 days and you're not necessarily going to face a big, huge boss every single day. So you can have that effect in your back pocket if you need it, and then on the days where you are expecting combat, you unprepare it and you have your list of prepared spells that you can use in combat. Speaking of which, we are going to be learning Otto's Irresistible Dance, which is something we are going to prepare. It is our second spell that inflicts a negative condition without requiring a saving throw at the initial effect taking place. So in general, Wall of Force is better than Otto's Irresistible Dance. However, Otto's Irresistible Dance can target really large enemies that cannot fit in a Wall of Force, and Otto's Irresistible Dance is useful when you're fighting a really big enemy and there are no minions accompanying it, so Wall of Forcing the enemy is not really going to do much. But if you cast Otto's Irresistible Dance on that single big enemy, there's no save, they get affected by the effect of the Irresistible Dance, and all of your allies will get advantage on attacks against him. So onto 12th level, we get another ASI, and we are going to actually increase our dexterity. There aren't really any other super impactful feats for us to take. I was considering taking Artificer Initiate in order to learn Thorn Whip. That will key off our intelligence so that we can better control the battlefield to pull enemies into our black tentacles. It would also allow us to get Sanctuary, which would key off our intelligence, which would better layer our defenses while we're concentrating. It is an option, but I thought it was just not impactful enough of a feat. So I'm going to increase our dexterity. We are doing this not only to increase our AC, but also to increase our initiative. So whereas other non-Bladesinger wizards would be taking alert probably at this level, we're going to increase our AC and our initiative. So by level 20, we're going to have the highest initiative that a wizard could possibly have. Why? Because we took Bladesinger and we're able to get that streamlined, efficient feat economy to afford to invest in dexterity. So again, we're getting so much synergy with the base wizard class by taking Bladesinger. So at this level, we are going to unprepare Blink because since we're using contingency on Blink in our off time, it's not as relevant to prepare it during the days that we expect combat. Though, it's still useful because, just because you contingent a Blink on your big boss battle doesn't mean you don't want to still use Blink again for another encounter, but it's not as necessary to have it prepared. So we are preparing, and what we are learning this level is Scatter, which is a very, very impactful spell. I would say a very underrated spell because I don't see a lot of people talking about it. So Scatter has a lot of uses. The most impactful uses for us is at the first round of combat, we put our black tentacles down, we maybe hit 3 or 4 people, and then by the time our turn comes around again at round 2, maybe 2 people have escaped from the tentacles. We're going to cast Scatter. We're going to put those 2 people that escaped from the tentacles back into the tentacles, and we're also going to put 4 other people that were never in the tentacles in the first place back into the tentacles as well. So just Scatter has such great synergy with environmental hazard effects like tentacles. So it's great for the playstyle that we're trying to go for. Also, even if you don't have black tentacles up, it can be useful as a get the fuck out because Scatter is one of our first teleportation spells that can target the entire party. So if everybody's getting completely destroyed by our enemies and we need to leave, Scatter, we're all out. Also, Scatter can be used, much like Thunderstep, preemptively. Even when we're not in a super dire situation, you can scatter the casters out of melee range of the enemies. You can scatter your melee allies into melee range of your enemies. You can scatter your enemy ranged combatants into melee range of your melee allies. You can scatter your melee enemies out of melee range of your allies. You could just completely readjust the battlefield to be more beneficial to you, and that really changes the flow of the encounter so much that its impact cannot be understated. We're also going to be learning Bigby's Hand at this level, which is basically an improved watery sphere. Then at 13th level, we're going to get our 7th level spell slot. We're going to learn Simulacrum, which is, again, iconic for Wizard, unique to Wizard, an extremely powerful spell. Basically makes a duplicate of yourself, so basically doubling your firepower when you need it. Of course, Simulacrum requires 8 hours to cast, so you're going to have to do it on your off time, which is why we're putting it in our unprepared spells, because when we're going into combat, we're not going to have Simulacrum prepared. And it's also very expensive to cast, so you can't just cast it all the time. You'll just have to wait to cast it when you have a day before a really big fight that you're anticipating. So it's there. We're also going to be learning Force Cage, which is our 3rd spell that provides a lockdown effect without requiring a saving throw from the enemy. It's basically the same as Wall of Force, except it does not require concentration. Level 14, we'll learn Song of Victory, which gives our intelligence modifier to our melee attack, so that's completely irrelevant. We will be preparing Tasha's Mind Whip, which is very similar to Mirror Image and Blink in that it's not super useful to prepare it when you first get 2nd level spells at level 3, but once you get super high level spells and you can afford to burn your 2nd level spell slots on other effects, it is extremely useful, mostly because it is an instantaneous effect that will stack with our big control spells. Most notably, it will be stacking with Black Tentacles, so if you whip someone in your tentacles, don't take that out of context, then even if they succeed on the check to escape the tentacles, they don't have their movement left to leave the tentacles, so they're going to just get restrained again when their turn comes around. So usually when we're going to use Mind Whip, we're going to upcast it as a 3rd level spell and target 2 targets so that it's more likely that at least one target will be affected by the Mind Whip. And at this level, when we have 7th level spells and all of these 6th and 5th and 4th level spells, it's worth it for us to use the 3rd level spell on a Mind Whip to augment our big control spells at higher level. We are also going to unprepare Fireball. We could have unprepared Fireball a while ago, but it was the most useful of our spells that we had. I mean, Fireball is still at this level useful against smaller enemies. It's useful against minions, but even the minions are starting to get pretty beefy in hit points, so we're going to unprepare it at this level. And we're going to put in Crown of Stars, which is similar to spells like Flaming Sphere, where it weaponizes your bonus action to do damage. It does pretty good damage, I believe 4d12. However, unlike Flaming Sphere, it does not require your concentration, so when we're concentrating on our big spells, we can put up a Crown of Stars and do some damage. Of course, that's probably not the best use of your 7th level spell slot. However, it is very useful when you're fighting that one big enemy where force caging that enemy or wall of forcing that enemy is not going to be effective because there's literally no other enemy on the field. So in the instances where you're fighting a single target enemy, you could Crown of Stars while you're maintaining an irresistible dance and be somewhat effective against that single target. So level 15, we're going to get an 8th level spell slot. We are going to prepare Maze, another one of our spells that don't require a saving throw to take its initial effect. Maze is again an improved Wall of Force where it's able to affect creatures that won't fit in the Wall of Force. It'll take them out of combat while you deal with all the minions, and then you can bring them back into combat and deal with them on your own terms. Also, it's great against enemies with legendary resistance because in order to escape the maze, you have to make an intelligence check, not a saving throw. So enemies cannot use their legendary resistance to escape the maze. So that's extremely useful as well. We're also going to learn Transmute Rock, which is a situational but useful spell. And we're not going to prepare it because we're only going to prepare Transmute Rock if we know we're going to be going into combat against enemies where we know there's going to be a stone floor, such as in a dungeon or a cave or something like that, which is not too uncommon, but not quite common enough that it's a guaranteed occurrence. So we're not going to just have it as one of our standard repertoire of spells. We're just going to keep it in reserve for when we know it's going to happen. So at level 16, we're going to get a ASI, and we're going to spend it on increasing our dexterity because we can afford to, and that'll further improve our initiative. And at this point, we are going to put Blink back into our prepared spells because we don't have anything better to put in at this point, and it's still decent. We're also going to add Dispel Magic to one of our spells known but not prepared because Dispel Magic isn't really too useful in combat. It's more useful out of combat in exploration and puzzle solving. And Dispel Magic is a spell that is widely available to basically all spellcasters, so one of your other allies could take it instead of you. Of course, if your party demands it, you can definitely take it at an earlier level, but in general, it's not maybe the most useful spell to take with your limited number of spells known. And then we're also going to take Antipathy Sympathy, which is a great spell that you can use if you know that you're going to face a very certain type of enemy. It is a spell you can cast in your off time, so we don't have to prepare it on the day we're actually going to use it, and it is a spell that will last 10 days, so it is very useful. And obviously it's not concentration. So at level 17, we get the famous 9th level spells. And at this point, we're going to unprepare Blink because it was only filling a slot while we were waiting for those 9th level spells. And we're going to get Wish, which is an amazing spell. And I'm just going to briefly talk about it. So there's 2 uses of Wish. The first use is to use it in an emergency when you need to replicate the effect of an 8th level spell or lower. So you'll just, as the situation requires, if you know there's an effect that you need at this exact situation and you don't have the spell slots to, or you don't have the spells known to reproduce that exact effect, you can cast a Wish, and in the emergency situation, you can basically create any effect you want because you can choose the exact spell you want to replicate in the exact scenario that you have found yourself in. And the second use of Wish is that on your off days, you can cast really great long-lasting spells like Simulacrum or Find Greater Steed or Hero's Feast to prepare yourself for the next day. So Wish is just great as an emergency option and great as a downtime option to layer up your party's arsenal. Now obviously Wish has like a million different uses, so it's a mandatory take. We're also going to take Mass Polymorph. It is the first spell we have that is an area of effect, save, or be taken out of the combat, which is amazing. It's basically a multi-target wall of force. How you use it is at the first round of combat, you cast Mass Polymorph on all of your enemies, half save, half don't. The half that fail are changed into frogs. Frogs don't have an attack action. They can just ribbit around and do nothing. So you just ignore them, and then you take care of the 5 people that failed to save, and then you start killing the frogs one at a time. So basically, it serves the same purpose as Wall of Force, except for multiple targets. So as great as Wall of Force is, Mass Polymorph is just infinitely more useful. At level 18, we are going to get Spell Mastery, and we're going to select Grease and Tasha's Mind Whip for our Spell Mastery, which means we can cast those spells at will if we have them prepared. So that's going to be a great option for us when we have people in our Black Tentacles. We can grease them and whip them. So, wow, that sounds so wrong. but that is what we are going to do. We're going to unprepare Dimension Door because Scatter does a similar effect and there's a bit of overlap there, and we need to prepare better spells at this point. And we are going to prepare Meteor Swarm and True Polymorph. So Meteor Swarm is extremely powerful. The level of damage it does is very appropriate for the amount of health that creatures will have for this CR. However, Meteor Swarm has like a huge radius, so trying to place it in a cramped dungeon or indoors is going to be very difficult. As far as I'm aware, you can cast Meteor Swarm indoors. You don't need a open roof for the meteor to come down. As far as I know, the spell conjures a meteor above the enemy, but of course you'll have to discuss that with your DM because the spell is a bit ambiguous. But assuming you can use it indoors, it would be very difficult to do that anyways because it's hard to place. So really the best use of Meteor Swarm is to use it outdoors, and you're not going to guarantee that you're going to be fighting outdoors. So that's why we didn't take Meteor Swarm at level 17. We're taking it a little later because Mass Polymorph you can use indoors and outdoors. But in the case that you can use Meteor Swarm, it is just a complete destructive force. So we want to have it prepared. And then we obviously get True Polymorph, which is basically an improved polymorph, as the name would imply, and it is used in the exact same situations where you would use polymorph, except it is now able to transform your allies into more CR appropriate forms that are more effective at this level. So basically you use it in an emergency when someone's about to go down, you drop your concentration on your big spell and you true polymorph them into a dragon, and now they are alive, they can use their action to contribute in combat. I would not suggest maintaining true polymorph for that full hour to turn them permanently into whatever creature you turn them into, because I'm pretty sure that PC is more powerful than whatever creature you can turn into with true polymorph. At 19th level, we're going to max out our dexterity. Again, Bladesinger is probably one of the only wizards who can afford to spend ASIs on dexterity, so they're going to have the best initiative of any of the wizards, which means you can do your wizard things better because you're more likely to go first and you're more likely to destroy the encounter. We're going to put Dimension Door back in because yes, it has overlap with Scatter, but again, Dimension Door can teleport through full cover, so it does have its unique use in that. We're also going to learn Sleet Storm and Mass Suggestion, but we're not going to prepare them because Sleet Storm is only useful if you know you're going to be fighting outdoors, basically, because it's hard to place a Sleet Storm indoors. And Mass Suggestion, similarly, is only useful if you know you're going to be fighting creatures who understand the language that you speak. It is basically a mass polymorph at a lower level, where if they fail their save, they're going to be taken out of the encounter. You can order them to flee or sleep or however they can occupy their time to not fight you. And finally, we get to 20th level and we get our signature spells, which are 3rd level spells that you can use without a spell slot once per short rest. And they're going to be Thunderstep and Blink because they are very widely applicable spells that you can basically use in every combat. And we're going to put Sleet Storm and Transmute Rock into our prepared list because we don't have to prepare our signature spells, so that opens up more preparation slots for us to put in more situational spells. We're going to unprepare Dimension Door because we have a better replacement for it in the form of Teleport, which is basically a multi-target Dimension Door. However, it is a very high level spell. It's a 7th level spell, but now we have 2 7th level spell slots, so we can afford to keep a 7th level spell slot in reserve to, in an emergency, teleport the fuck out in case things get really dicey. And we're also going to learn Shape Change, which we're not going to prepare quite yet. Shape Change is an extremely powerful spell if you use it to turn yourself into specific creatures off the top of my head, I can think the Ancient Brass Dragon, which has Sleep Breath, or the Pit Fiend that has Hold Monster at Will, which is really powerful because Shape Change also lets you use your class features and abilities while in the shape of the creature you've changed into. And if your DM allows it and thinks it's appropriate, you could Blade Sing as an Ancient Brass Dragon, which is just ridiculously powerful. However, there's one big caveat that Shape Change has, and that is you have to have seen the creature before. So if you've seen a really powerful creature that you think you'll be able to use so effectively that it's worth a 9th level spell slot, feel free to take Shape Change at an earlier level and prepare it. But otherwise, we'll just keep it in our unprepared spells until we see a creature we think is worth shape changing into. And that is the end of the build. So clearly I've listed a very in-depth analysis and ratio of what spells to take and what spells not to, which is clearly very flexible depending on, as a wizard, what spells you find in spell books, because if you find spells that you would have taken, you can then use your spells known to learn other spells. So now that we've gone through the entire build, I just wanted to take a moment and look back and sort of analyze how taking Blade Singer at level 2 really augmented our ability to be that at-distance controller. So right at level 1, we did not have to multi-class Artificer to gain a defensive buff, because that is inherent in our class. We got to start with 18 intelligence, whereas other wizards would probably be tempted to take Warcaster. We got to start with the telekinetic feat, which allowed us to make a shove, which really augmented our controlling abilities, whereas other wizards would probably take Warcaster. We don't have to waste a spell known, spell prepared, or spell slot every day on casting Mage Armor. We can instead prepare better spells. We can instead use those spell slots on Grease, on better control spells. At level 4, we got a 20 intelligence, and we didn't need to take Warcaster, whereas other wizards, if they have a 20 intelligence at level 4, are really feeling it because their concentration checks are just not where they need to be. We were able to take Alert at level 8, whereas other wizards would struggle to do this without having severe deficiencies in their concentration check or in their intelligence level. And Alert is an extremely powerful feat for a controller like us that wants to go first in combat. And finally, at level 19, we were able to max out our dexterity, allowing us to have the most initiative that a wizard could possibly have without sacrificing other important aspects of our build. And we have the best AC a wizard can have without sacrificing other aspects that are inherent in playing a wizard. So in general, the Blade Singer archetype streamlines the general playstyle of the wizard and allows an amazing feat economy, giving the wizard the power to be as wizardly as they possibly can, as quick as they possibly can. And that's what I really like about the Blade Singer and why we chose this subclass to be the controller character we were looking for. So if you're interested in looking at this doc, I will post it in the description. And feel free to like, subscribe, and comment any tips or criticisms or advice or anything that you'd like to let me know. And hopefully I will see you guys in the next video. So thanks for watching, and I wish you the best on your journey.